On August 29, 1911, a man walked out of the hills north of Oroville, California, and collapsed near the corral of a slaughterhouse. He was starving, exhausted, and nearly naked. He spoke a language that no one present had ever heard. He was the last living member of the Yahi people, a group that had been hiding in the wilderness of Northern California for over 40 years. He had never seen a paved road, a telephone, or an electric light. Within a week, he was riding a streetcar through San Francisco.
His name, or the name he accepted, Ishi simply means man in Yahi, and the anthropologists who took him in gave it to him because he refused to share his real one, became famous overnight. Newspapers called him the last wild Indian in America. Thomas Waterman and Alfred Kroeber, both from the University of California, brought him to their anthropology museum in San Francisco, where he lived for the remaining 4.5 years of his life. What struck the people around him was not confusion, it was selection. Ishi watched automobiles pass without much interest. He understood the principle, a thing that carries you. Horses did that, canoes did that. But a match, striking fire from a small stick, on demand, without preparation, that reportedly fascinated him. According to Theodora Kroeber, who later wrote his story from her husband Alfred's notes, Ishi found the crowds of San Francisco more unsettling than any single machine. Not the technology, the sheer density of strangers.
This is where most conversations about ancient humans encountering modern life go wrong. They assume the gap is cognitive. It is not. The Homo sapiens brain has not changed in any structurally significant way in roughly 300,000 years. The skulls found at Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, dated to around that age, held brains the same size and shape as yours. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, humans were engraving geometric patterns into ochres 77,000 years ago. They were making shell beads. They were mixing pigments in abalone shells and storing them, which means they were planning days ahead, thinking symbolically, and organizing materials for future use. These are not people waiting to become intelligent. They were already there. If you took a newborn from Blombos Cave and raised her in a modern city, there is no evidence in neuroscience or genetics to suggest she would struggle in school. The hardware is identical. What changed is not the machine. What changed is everything the machine has access to.
The anthropologist Michael Tomasello calls it the ratchet effect. Each generation inherits the knowledge of the last and adds a thin layer. The ratchet turns forward. It does not slip back. Writing accelerated it. Printing accelerated it again. The internet made the ratchet spin so fast that no single human being now understands the full chain of knowledge behind even one ordinary object in their home. Take your phone. No one person on Earth knows how to build it. The mining engineer who extracts the rare earth elements does not know how to design a processor. The chip designer does not know how to write the operating system. The software engineer does not know how to manufacture the glass. The object in your pocket is the product of 10,000 interlocking specializations, each resting on centuries of accumulated, inherited technique. An ancient human is not too unintelligent to understand a phone. No living human understands a phone either. We have simply each learned one narrow link of a very long chain.
During the Second World War, Allied forces built airstrips across Melanesia. Planes landed carrying food, medicine, tools, clothing. Local populations, many with limited prior contact with industrialized societies, watched cargo appear as if summoned by ritual. Men spoke into boxes, and planes descended from the sky. When the war ended and the bases closed, something remarkable happened. On the island of Tana, in what is now Vanuatu, a movement formed around a figure called John Frum. Followers built replica control towers from bamboo. They carved wooden headphones. They cleared landing strips in the jungle and waited. This was not irrationality. It was a logical framework applied to an incomplete dataset. They had observed a strong correlation. Certain behaviors preceded the arrival of goods, and they acted on it. The anthropologist Peter Worsley, writing in the 1950s, argued these movements were entirely rational responses to an encounter with technology so far beyond local experience that its actual mechanisms were simply invisible.
Some modern things would be immediately legible to a person from 40,000 years ago. Music, rhythm, melody, repetition, appears in every known human culture and stretches back at least to the bone flutes of Hohlefels Cave in Germany, roughly 43,000 years old. A song would need no explanation. A recording of a song might. When Thomas Edison first demonstrated the phonograph in 1877, even his contemporary Western audience, people who already understood gears, electricity, and vibration, struggled with what they were hearing. A Scientific American editorial that year called it the most astounding thing the journal had encountered. For someone without that scaffolding of mechanical knowledge, a disembodied voice would carry no obvious explanation at all. Fire at the press of a button would translate. Light after dark would translate. We have engineered that for hundreds of thousands of years, since the controlled hearths found at sites like Kesem Cave in Israel. But a screen showing a moving image of a place you have never been, updating in real time, that has no analog in any prior human experience.
Nothing in 300,000 years prepares you for the collapse of distance. And then there is what they would notice by its absence. A person from the Upper Paleolithic would have known the night sky with an intimacy that is nearly extinct. Every star visible to the naked eye, roughly 5,000 on a clear night, would have been part of the landscape overhead, as familiar as the ground underfoot. The Milky Way was not a metaphor. It was a physical band of light, visible every cloudless evening. According to a 2016 study published in Science Advances, more than 80% of the world's population now lives under light-polluted skies. A third of humanity cannot see the Milky Way at all. A visitor from the deep past, standing in any modern city after dark, would look up and find the sky nearly empty. We would have to explain that the stars are still there, that we simply built so many lights of our own that we drowned them out. Of all the things we have gained, this might be the hardest to justify: a sky full of light with nothing left to see in it.
There is a counter-argument worth taking seriously, and it runs the other direction entirely. Drop a modern office worker into the Pleistocene and measure who is lost. Aboriginal Australians maintained continuous cultural traditions for at least 65,000 years. Their navigational knowledge, reading water, wind, animal behavior, star positions, and seasonal shifts across landscapes with few permanent landmarks, represents a cognitive achievement that most modern humans could not replicate with a year of training. We have offloaded so much spatial reasoning to GPS that a widely cited 2011 study by Veronique Bobat at McGill found heavy GPS use is correlated with measurably reduced gray matter in the hippocampus, the brain region most involved in spatial memory. Correlation is not causation, but the direction is hard to ignore. We are not smarter than ancient humans. We are differently dependent. We have traded individual competence for collective infrastructure. The moment that infrastructure fails, a blackout, a broken supply chain, a satellite going dark, we are exposed in ways that a Paleolithic hunter-gatherer simply never was.
The question is not whether they could learn to survive our world. It is whether we could survive theirs. Yahi died of tuberculosis on March 25, 1916, less than 5 years after he walked out of those hills. He learned English. He demonstrated Yahi tool-making techniques to museum visitors every Sunday. He adapted to a world that was not built for him. The question this channel keeps circling is not what ancient people lacked. It is what they carried that we have quietly